Stunning. Thank you. I think we've just started recording. So I think we'll start with introductions, if that's okay with everyone. So I'm Sharon, she, her, and I'm the Students Association president this year. One of my manifesto points was to really kind of support and engage estranged students, particularly during Estranged Student Solidarity Week. So the kind of aim for this group discussion with our really great panelists was to kind of talk about the support available, how we can better support these students, how we can improve the support available, and kind of what's next for us. So I think it'd be really useful if everyone could kind of go around and introduce themselves. I think for kind of ease, I might just like pick names so we don't get confused on the screen. So I'm just going to go in the order that you're on my screen. Lindsay, do you want to start?
Thank you, and thank you for having me along to the event today. I'm Lindsay Jack. I use she, her pronouns. I'm Director of Student Experience at Edinburgh Law School, so I have responsibility to create a kind of vibrant and distinctive culture for entry to and learning at Edinburgh Law School's top courses. And I do that using a holistic lens, but very much with a focus on widening participation, underrepresentation and marginalisation. So thanks again for having me today.
Lauren?
Hi everyone, my name's Lauren and my pronouns are she, her. I'm the Vice President of Welfare at the Students Association, which means that I'm the kind of lead for widening participation in terms of representation and support, both here at the university, here at the Students Association, and liaising with the university as well.
Thank you. Laura?
Hi, yeah, I'm Laura and I am Deputy of UK Outreach and Widening Participation, and my job is about trying to attract and to support students into the university who might be from backgrounds underrepresented in higher education or might face barriers in accessing higher education for a range of reasons. And I try to coordinate policy and strategy that helps us as an institution to do that collectively. And then I'm lucky enough to lead 2 teams that are actively involved in doing lots of outreach in communities to support those students to apply, but then also we coordinate a number of programs on course for some of those target groups so that we have a whole student life cycle kind of approach. And supporting estranged students and care experienced students is probably one of the pieces of work that gets me up in the morning and has done for many years, and has been something that I've been very passionate about all through my career. So really glad to be here.
Thank you. And last but not least, Jim.
Hi, yeah, I'm Jim. I use they, them pronouns. And my job is the graduate intern for the Edinburgh Cares and the URED team as part of the widening participation team in student recruitment and admissions. I do a lot of outreach to high schools as part of the URED team, doing open days, things like that. I also do further education transition just now with the colleges that are in the surrounding area, trying to answer questions as part of the Hub for Success group for those students who are looking to go on to do higher education. For our 3 priority groups of care experience and estranged students and student carers, I do a lot of correspondence with and answering their questions, helping signpost them to support, and generally just supporting the work that our manager within the team, Kirsten Henry, does, but a lot of other things aside.
Sharon, just a quick thing. I got so fixated with remembering what my new job title was that I forgot to say that my pronouns are she, her. So apologies, I forgot.
No problem. Thank you for that. Amazing. Thank you all so much for coming. Very much appreciate all the kind of points of view that you'll bring to this discussion. It's all super, super valuable. So I guess just to start, I think it might be helpful. So we've signed the Standalone Pledge, which is kind of, Standalone is a charity which kind of organise and kind of run Estranged Student Solidarity Week and kind of motivate us in sticking to the pledges of what we've signed and making sure that we have continued support for these students. Is someone able to speak on the Standalone Pledge in terms of why we've signed it and what that means for us as an institution?
I'm happy to start because I think I like to think I'm partially to blame for that, in that it was something that I wanted us, and I thought was really important, that we were a part of. So worked with the principal, Peter Matson, to make sure that we were committed to that. I think part of the reason we did it was because we wanted to send a really clear signal and message to that part of our student community that we care, that we are there for them, that we're interested, that they're important to us, and that we recognise how significant estrangement can be at any point in a person's life. I think it was important for us to also do it and not say this is just a part of something else, but this is a distinct group of students with distinct challenges. Obviously, even within that, though, they're not homogenous. So for me, it was important that we had a separate, clear commitment to that community of students. And the kind of things that we committed to in that particular pledge were around our accommodation offer, was around our financial support, around well-being and pastoral support for those students, and also outreach to those communities prior to coming to support them to apply. So those are the kind of areas that we committed to at the time, and I just felt like everything that standalone were kind of encouraging and driving us to do were absolutely what we wanted to do. Some of the things I think were already in progress, and some of the things we've still got a little way to go. But yeah, a part of it was just having a really clear intent and visible message that this is important to us, and that was the initial driver. There's more I could say, but I don't want to just keep rambling in case there's others who might want to come in, or we want to go a different route.
No, that was really helpful. Is there anything that anyone wants to add on that? No. So I guess the theme for this year's Estranged Student Solidarity Week is identifying estranged students. And you kind of spoke about how students can become estranged whilst at university. So I think it'd be interesting to get a range of insights on kind of mechanisms for students in receiving that support on like an institutional level, but also within schools. What the experience has been for students in finding and accessing that support and making clear their background and what support they might need. So, Lindsay, do you want to start us off? Not to pick on you.
Sure, so I can certainly speak from the school perspective. We are not so much about identifying students, although I can talk a bit about what we try to do and look out for in language and in what students are telling us that might then cause us to think that a student is estranged or living without family support, and then we would direct them towards the appropriate support. So I certainly work very closely with our student advisor team, with the student support office, and with the undergraduate office as well here at law school. And I do a piece of training for our undergraduate tutors, but also for the student advisors around who are our students and what does that mean for what we do. So I think there's a piece certainly there around training, and obviously student advisors get a huge amount of training, and they get training directly from the Edinburgh Cares team as well. So that's a very important part of it. I think we can't kind of underline enough how important training is as part of this conversation. But at the more local level then, as I say, I'll do a little bit about who our students are and what that might mean. And when I'm doing that training, I'm thinking about the experiences students may have, or the things that they may have as part of their identity as a result of certain categories that they have self-identified into. So I think that's very important to think, for example, about, trauma awareness around all students, but specifically understanding that there are groups of students who may be more likely to have experienced trauma. So we're not saying, here's someone who's first in family to go to university, this means they will have, and list things. But what I try to do is open up conversations around that and say, this means a student may be more likely to have experienced these things or have these types of feelings when they start an institution like this. And the other part of it is those open conversations that I try to encourage with all our students. So when I'm doing the welcome talks, for example, to all our new students, when I'm doing outreach work with secondary school students or with college students, I'm talking about the types of support that the University of Edinburgh gives to students. And I'm mentioning specifically, we may have people here today who are care experienced or who are estranged, and, actually just mentioning those things so that people think, oh, okay, actually, I didn't know that they had that support, or that person might be talking about me. And I think there are those parts there. I'm not saying we have it solved in any way, shape or form, but certainly working with the student advisors to think about what kinds of things might a student be telling us, even if they're not directly telling us, and what triggers might that open up then for what we do in terms of then liaising with the Edinburgh Cares team to make sure students are supported. So I can stop there just to let others come in.
Who wants to come in next? Lauren, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I think what I was going to say was that kind of picking up from what Lindsay said about looking out for those signs as staff, I think it's really important that staff at the university, out with the Edinburgh Cares team, I don't know if we need to say more specifically, but like what all of the things that the Edinburgh Cares team does, that might be helpful for somebody to pick up after me. But that like lots of different staff have an awareness, because lots of students either might become estranged or might be estranged but not necessarily identify with that term, or have kind of varying levels of estrangement, especially when there can be quite like procedural barriers to overcome in terms of like becoming legally estranged, and that can be really intimidating for students. But we also don't want students who are like, they're not necessarily gone through all the procedural elements of estrangement, but it means that they are maybe receiving minimum student loans based on their parental income, but they're not kind of accessing that support. They're not receiving like either financial or emotional, mental support. So kind of making sure that people have an understanding. I think it's also for everyone's kind of responsibility in terms of the way they talk about loads of different things, to consider that not everyone has a family to go home to. And for some people that can be really triggering and upsetting, especially as we're coming up to the winter break. I think making sure that we're not going, oh, it's going to be so nice for you all to spend some time with your family. I think that's just not the reality for so many students. And that is really layered and can be for lots of reasons, lots of different estrangement reasons, and also lots of other reasons. So I think making sure that people don't kind of are cautious of their language. So partly it's our responsibility to make sure that people understand what estrangement might look like, but also if you're not estranged, or if you've never met an estranged person, to kind of make sure you're really aware of what everyone else's experiences might look like, and so that you're not kind of doing casual harm for something that might be really upsetting for other students.
Thank you. So, Jim, Edinburgh Cares was obviously mentioned quite a bit. Do you want to pick up on that point?
I will do. I'll bring in what I can remember off the top of my head. I'm still getting to grips with everything within the role. But within Edinburgh Cares, we do have a lot of interest and a lot of focus on developing the things that have been mentioned here, about reaching out to teams to inform them about the things like the language used, the situations to be aware of, especially if estrangement, when it comes to that, the concept that someone might not even be aware that they are under this banner of being estranged, and they do have that level of support available to them in different places. So we're looking out for opportunities to teach different teams about that through our training, but also through students who we might come across. And we're trying to cast wide nets occasionally, just to say, if these kind of things have affected you, you might want to come along, chat to us, have a conversation with us, we can discuss what's there, and trying to increase and enhance different aspects of what's already in place, things like the accommodation offers, ensuring that as we can go forward and we progress with our work, things like ensuring if someone does have 365-day accommodation, they're staying at the university for the entire time they're there in the accommodation. If they're wanting to, that they can stay in that same place, would be something that would be really, really beneficial, I think, for a lot of our students who are under these banners. And the idea of needing to move them again and again as the remit for the next year comes in, the new students come in, and then the needs of the accommodation change. It's obviously a very challenging thing to overcome, and we have to deal with all the teams and a lot of the bureaucracy and the red tape that's there. But that's the things we're trying to push through, and trying to make things a little easier, make things a little less black and white where things are, and just look at those shades of grey to be able to find situations that allow our students, estranged students, student carers, and care experienced students to have a more supported time where they feel supported, they feel heard, and they feel seen, that their issues are understood and things are being actively done to address those through the years.
Amazing, thank you. Laura, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I mean, I think Jim put it all really excellently. So I don't think I do, other than, I suppose, just to echo what they said around, you know, the Edinburgh Cares team is a busy, important, small team, but a really important part of what they do is working with others across the institution to make it happen. And that's probably what we all do in our work around widening participation, or it's certainly what we're all trying to do. But I think, and now I think it's just worth flagging things like, we have a really we're now moving into having a much more comprehensive student support model, and so we work quite closely with advisors and wellbeing advisors to make sure that they're aware and they're flagging these opportunities and they're talking to students, because they're going to be the ones who are often having these initial conversations. So yeah, sometimes we might, if there's a much more challenging case, or a student's not getting the support they need, or if there's more specialist advice we might need to offer, but a lot of the time we're trying to signpost students to what is there and make sure if there are gaps, we're working with those areas to try and bolster that. We're not trying to necessarily fill them. We may temporarily to make something happen, but we're really trying to make sure that the support is in the right part of the university for that student. So that was the only thing I would add. But to be honest, I think Jim did an excellent summary for somebody who's been in the role for 8 weeks. So brilliant work.
Amazing, thank you. On the student support model, I know that, Lauren, you've had quite a bit of involvement in that element. So obviously that's moved away from a personal tutor model. I wonder if you'd have anything to comment on kind of how equipped they are to in signposting and being aware of estrangement and knowing how to support students throughout that, because especially when it happens or when it occurs to students during university and not prior, it's something that's hard to pick up on.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my favorite things about the student support model is that I think it does kind of take that onus off of students a bit to have to explain themselves at every opportunity. I think having specific staff that's there, it's their full-time job to be a student advisor. They're not then running off to the lab, then running off to a conference, then doing something else. It means that everyone kind of receives the same training. And I think it's been amazing that they've been able to receive training from the Edinburgh Cares team. Because I know that I've had great opportunities to work with them throughout both my terms. And they're such a really wonderful bunch who really know their staff. So it's really reassuring to know that there's so many new staff that have all kind of had that background. Because that just kind of means that for students who are not familiar with that team at all, because let's be honest, there's lots of different teams at the university that are kind of just trucking away in the background, and you might never need them, but suddenly you might suddenly need them. And to make sure that kind of that one sort of first point of contact in your student advisor for if you need support, knowing that they kind of know that that's available to you is going to be really valuable. And kind of same goes for other types of support as well. But I think it sets a really good precedent in terms of all of those staff members receiving that training. It really reduces the kind of risk of like kind of what I was mentioning before about potentially harmful comments, and just kind of general lack of awareness and ignorance, because there is that kind of responsibility, and it's coming from the people that work the closest with care experienced and estranged students. So I think I'm really hopeful that that's going to make a big difference to a lot of students in the coming years.
Amazing, thank you for that. So we've touched a little bit already on kind of the pledge and kind of what that means vaguely in terms of accommodation support. I wonder if we can kind of, and Jim, you kind of touched on it as well, in terms of making sure that these students have that accommodation 365 days a year. what kind of is that accommodation support, and how can we kind of improve on it? Whoever wants to pick that up first.
Sorry, can you just, so you're saying we've got the 360 days offer of support, but what can we do to improve that? Is that what you're saying?
So kind of
Yeah,
what is the
yeah.
support that we already have? It was touched on briefly,
Yeah.
but what does that really mean? And yeah, how can we improve on it?
Shall I say how I understand it, but please others feel free to come in on that, because at the moment I haven't been so closely involved in it recently, but like my understanding is, as you say, Sharon, that we offer 365 days of accommodation, but what that actually means is 365 days in, it could be in different accommodation. So it may not be for you may not be in the same place for that entire time. That's one, I guess, important aspect to that. There are reasons for that. And I think we're always working quite closely with accommodation teams to I guess challenge that and see if that is the right approach. I think sometimes it is the right approach actually, and sometimes it isn't. And I think sometimes where it is that it's better that a student is in the most appropriate accommodation for them, even if it means they have to move once over the summer, because actually they're going to be more supported in that environment sometimes. So therefore sometimes I think it is the right thing, and sometimes unfortunately at the moment I think it's been about what has been the only way to do it in terms of managing like where students are and demand and things like that. That's my understanding, but I'm really happy to unpick that in a minute. And then I guess the other aspect of the accommodation offer is around the summer, and trying to ensure that students have a reduced, reasonable rate for their rent over the summer. And generally that is always agreed. I guess what I think I'd probably like us to work towards is maybe a more automatic way of doing that, so there's not any risk of it being like, if a student didn't know, they could ask for it, or if they hadn't, or if they hadn't disclosed that they were estranged, that they somehow didn't access that. So I think those are some of the the risk points to it. I don't have any doubt of how supportive the teams are over there, and I know they do their utmost to find the right space for students. But I think we have to also acknowledge that estranged students, like I said before, are not a homogenous group, and they will all have really different needs and requirements. So it ends up actually being quite complicated, as you might expect, because people are complicated, and it's, so I think they are. I don't have any sense that the accommodation services aren't willing and aren't supportive and aren't trying to get it right, because I do think they put in a lot of effort to do that. But sometimes it isn't going quite right in places, I think, as well. Or there's some room definitely to enhance that, whether it's about more of an automated approach to it, so it's less individualized. Pros and cons to both, right? Because I think when it's individualized and our teams are really involved in it, then I think actually the student gets a better outcome, but it can be stressful for that student, the actual process. So I think it's really difficult to know what's the best approach. But yeah, I'm rambling a little bit as well, so I don't know, feel free to challenge me on any of that. That's just kind of my understanding of it. And Jim, you might also feel free to pitch in if you've got any other insights there.
Yeah, I think just what you're saying about support, I think, is one of the most important aspects of it. And again, the taking out the homogenized factor and considering people as individuals and bringing in the student voice aspects. I think work needs to be done to develop those areas where we're asking the students who are in 365 accommodation, what would be best for you in this situation? Because if they do have a support network within those halls, and they're going to want to stay in those halls because those people are also staying in those halls, that's something that should be encouraged and should be kept in place.
Yeah,
When you have a situation where you have a lack of support from other places, any areas of support that do exist should be strengthened, and that structure should be kept there wherever possible. But I think that, as you say, Laura, it does definitely come from a place of speaking to the students and understanding what it is that they want and what they need, because that's really at the core of it. And when you consider the promise and everything on top of these things, that is the core of the work. It's listening to the people that it affects most and having the action informed by those words.
Can I just come in? I think it's a really important point that you mentioned the promise as well, because the promise, I'm sure you'd be familiar, but like it's about that does the Scottish sector drive to commit and support focuses primarily on care experience students, but the Scottish Government latterly have made it really clear that estranged students are also a part of that cohort, and that Scottish universities should consider this in the same way and ensure that the same support is available to estranged students. It's just the language initially with the promise was more focused on care experience, but that has shifted. And the reason I just say that is that then in the last few years we made sure that our plans that support care experience students are also focused on estranged students. So one of the things that has happened since the pledge was a piece of really important co-created research that was done last summer with some of our estranged students and care experience students, which asked them, like, what do you think? What needs to be made better? What could be improved? And I mean, accommodation was definitely up there. It was definitely in their sort of top 5 areas. But I think I just wanted to flag it, because when Jim was saying about the promise, I just wanted to kind of emphasize that now as an institution, we're looking at this collectively, thinking, so we're prioritizing estranged students alongside our commitment to care experience students. And while that might seem like it's kind of conflating something unhelpfully, I actually think it's really important, because it's where we have a legislative duty as an institution. So it kind of it puts more emphasis on the work actually, and makes it even more significant. So yeah, while we do have we have signed the pledge, I think possibly even of more importance is like the legislative part of what we've put in place as well around this. But yeah, I think I'd need to remind myself, but some of the things I remember the students talked about in particular around accommodation was also the importance of feeling safe in accommodation, and wanting and feeling like there had been an increase risk of like harassment and I'm just trying to, and other cases of racism as well that they'd experienced within accommodation. So that those are the kind of things as well that I think are quite important. And that's not quite what you're asking, Sharon, but I think those were some of the things that definitely came out of that research as well, wanting to feel they were in a safe space. And you could completely understand how even more important that is for a student who's estranged when they've maybe not been in safe spaces before. So that was certainly a priority that came up, but I might stop talking for a minute.
Thank you for that. No, that was really quite interesting and useful to know. There's definitely parts of that I wasn't aware of, so that's for sure. On the kind of improvement aspect, I think what was mentioned was definitely very valuable, and the kind of sense of community element that was also touched on is definitely important in terms of making sure there's not just one estranged student in an entire accommodation hall, and making sure that if it was easier and there was kind of an emphasis on that sense of community, if they were kind of encouraged to get that support from being in a similar accommodation. And just on a similar,
sorry, Sharon. No, you found.
On that kind of same note, because that's especially relevant out of the semester time in summer and the winter break, when a lot of students return to their home address or their non-term time address. So I was kind of wondering what kind of support there is during those periods of time, those gaps in the semester, but also not to interrupt what you were saying earlier.
No, I was just reminding myself of what our priorities were in the corporate parenting plan, and I'll pop it in the chat as well so people can see it. But one of them was around exploring 12-month tenancies. Another is around making sure there's a stronger culture of care in our accommodation, and also another around preferential rent rates and making sure that was very upfront and transparent. So those are the key things that we're working towards, and estranged students are direct beneficiaries of that. So, but yeah, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. But those are just some things I wanted to remember before. They're not easy things to do, though. I think it's fair to say. Sorry. Someone else might want to come in. I just lost my trail of thought then.
Is anyone keen to pick up the point on kind of out of the semester support?
I know for right now, we are offering just quite limited things for the current winter break. So we're encouraging our students within the 3 priority groups to attend these festive lunches that are going ahead in the next couple of weeks, which I think are they happening at Pollock Halls? Is that right? Yes. So we're trying to encourage that. We've managed to get some free places for that rather than paid places. I think it's originally £5 per head, but for people who are staying here, but we got those 3 places in place. I think there is more work to be done in this aspect. It is obviously a tricky aspect as well, because we have the fact that the university is officially closed, and I've not been around the university long enough. I was working in university before, but only since January, and I don't have the breadth of knowledge to explore what that could look like, because this is my first winter break with university, so I don't know if someone else can build on that.
I think one of the things that we were encouraged to do as mentors as well, so we have care experience students are eligible if they want to have a staff mentor, and I believe that's now been extended to estranged students as well. And one of the things we were encouraged to do in mentor training and in our kind of interactions with the team there is to kind of reach out during those breaks as well, and sort of make ourselves available should students want to get in touch with us that way. And so there's that kind of one-on-one. If someone's built up a relationship, it's almost like we know that it's the winter holidays, but please don't feel that you're on your own in that way. So I think there's that kind of contact there, and I'm pretty sure that lots of events were run over summer as well. I think that's really important as well. So I'm sure Kirsten and Jess at the time were doing lots of events, picnics in the park and trips to the beach and bouldering and all sorts of things. And I'm sure some of them were taking place over the summer break as well, just to kind of again, just show that solidarity, because we're here all year long. The contrary to popular belief, staff who work in universities don't get the summer off, and so I think it's important that we kind of capitalise on that, the fact that we're here anyway, and help some of our most vulnerable groups of students.
Yeah, can I just come in? I think I think the Edinburgh Cares team do quite a lot, in particular, as Lindsay said, around sort of exam times, around stressful sort of exam times, making sure students have well-being packs and things like that. Also doing quite a bit over the summer break, and making sure that they can access funds then, because sometimes that can be challenging as well. I also think however, that other parts of the uni has really stepped up and do quite a lot now at those times of years. I have to say, I think a lot of that shifted during COVID, when we had the COVID call centre, and then a lot more staff were aware of what actually happens over those times when we had there was always somebody they could speak to on the phone. It creates a lot more awareness. I'm not saying that was the only time, and there's always been staff in roles like Res Life and roles like wellbeing services who have always been aware of that, I think. But it created a better consciousness of what students experience over those periods, I think. And then I feel like that's carried on since then. There's been far more activity that yourselves and the Students' Union, Students' Association have always organised. Also, accommodation, Res Life, they do quite a lot, I would say. and some of the private providers as well that run our accommodation, like Unite, also do quite a bit. And Unite, as you know, have a number of free accommodation sort of scholarships for targeted at estranged students and care experience students, and they do provide quite a lot of support over those breaks. But I don't feel we're reliant on them as such, but I think they are really complementary sort of to other stuff that's going on. So I feel like there's a better, a tighter, more coordinated community around that, and some of the like the wellbeing forums help that to happen. And a lot of that's like became more coordinated over COVID, and that structure's remained, which I think is really, really good, and that wider accountability. And that's not the word I would like to use, but I think sometimes that is what it is. So just that, like, actually the uni term does not end for many people, and lots of people are here and they don't have anywhere to go, and they don't have that same structure over that break. And that extends to a lot of different communities, not only estranged students, but yeah, I feel like that is a much better space than it has been pre-COVID. But that's my experience. Lindsay, you might feel differently. I don't know, because we've both been around a little while at the uni.
No, I think that's right. And there certainly are those kind of pockets of local support as well. So I don't want to sort of say too much in case I, accidentally identify students by sort of talking about small numbers. But it's certainly the case that for students I work with particularly, I would let them know when I was available over the summer. For some students, I meet them maybe monthly or so if that's something that's helpful to them. And that might be with them and with a social worker and with someone else as well and we get together and we just have a chat about how everything's going, and that doesn't stop for summer. So it's things like that, sort of making sure that we're available. And another thing that I would do is if someone is interested in coming to study law, and if they're in touch with the Edinburgh Cares team, then they will offer to them that they can come on campus and, meet me, and we'll have a tour, we'll have a walk around the law school, see what it feels like. And often that's maybe with a supporter as well. So it might be the potential student plus a supporter. And we'll just have a really good talk about everything and about what it might look and feel like to be a student at the University of Edinburgh, specifically in the law school as well. Again, I'm not saying we have that fixed, and I would love to do that for many more students as well, but it's only those who really want to kind of take that up who come in, and I think that's another important part of it as well. So there's the kind of entire journey, although we're focusing obviously a lot on when students are at university, there is that whole piece across the journey of what makes students decide that they want to be students here in the first place, and across all 4 strands of the widening participation strategy as well.
I think it's worth saying that I think the Edinburgh Cares team and the students we work with have found the chaplaincy to be a really important space as well, all year round. It's a really calm, positive place to be. It's then a fairly neutral space. People might have their own feelings about it, but it's definitely the way that they run that space, and that's been really positive all year round, I would say. And when students are having really challenging times in their lives, I feel they really step up for students. They're just there for them all the time. So I'd say that's a really important part of it. And I know the Edinburgh Cares team do quite a lot with the chaplaincy and try to make sure students are well aware of what they offer as well. So yeah.
It's very minor compared to what everyone else has very valuably, that doesn't feel like a word, raised. But I found out the other day that you can go to the gym for free between Christmas and New Year. So maybe something to do for people that are still on campus. Try one of the dance classes. I've been going with mixed results. But thought it was worth a mention. Good job supporting exercise.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you for that. I want to kind of move us on in the last few minutes to talk about kind of representation. And this might be, like, as kind of was touched on, student voices and student representation, how these voices are kind of built into discussions and what kind of student support groups these students can look to in terms of building and fostering a community Lauren, I don't know if you want to start that or not.
Sure. So I guess there's a few different options. People might be familiar. There's different student groups that are student-led, like tackling elitism. Go Sharon for being part of setting that up. And that's a kind of widening participation group that's run, that's led by students. And then in terms of the Students Association, there's kind of a few different things in terms of sometimes we do social events, and sometimes we do more kind of specific information gathering and representation events in terms of actually kind of capturing that student voice, making sure that it can be amplified up to the university. So at any point, any student from widening participation backgrounds is more than welcome to reach out to myself and to talk about kind of any of the issues that have come up so far in our discussion, particularly if you have feedback or things that you'd like to improve, because these things get raised both through my seat on the Edinburgh Cares Committee, which, as kind of Laura's mentioned, is about our legislative responsibility for care experience students. But what's been really valuable is that so much of that work has also looked at where we can embed the experiences of estranged students as much as possible as well, and to recognise those parallels, because even though there's not the kind of legislative responsibility, that doesn't mean that we can't kind of choose to do that as an institution. And also through the broader widening participation strategy, which I'm also on. So, and then in kind of terms of any other support, and if people like to kind of organise themselves, we can help students find other students if they wanted to set up like a society or any other kind of student group. And we're kind of doing some work at the moment in terms of reviewing what different groups of students from widening participation backgrounds need and are looking for. If they're looking for more representative spaces, if they're looking for more social spaces, and kind of what terms that they identify with. So kind of look out for a survey coming out to kind of get a bit more background to kind of shape that work to make sure that it's kind of meeting the needs of the students from those different backgrounds.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren. I don't know if there was a hand up or a question in the chat. If anyone...
Hi guys. Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm actually running to an exam right now, so I'm a little bit multitasking, but I just wanted to say that it's really great to hear that there's so much work being done, particularly about estranged students and how it might be. I just want to really, sorry, there's loads of traffic. I just want to, from personal experience, I just want to really push home the psychological toil that it can take on students as well as study. And it can sometimes feel, because you're independent by default, it can sometimes feel like very difficult to reach out when you have a problem. I know for myself, I mean, just a bit of background, I've been estranged from my mother for 4 years now. I'm in therapy outside of university and I'm working on it, but I find it really difficult to approach people about this issue. And I think it's just important from someone who is estranged, just to drive that home, that you might have to really push, not push, but you might have to really make these resources available and really obvious and really, really there for people. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Definitely agree. It's something that is super important because students generally don't reach out for help, and especially student groups that are less likely to reach out for help. It's even more important to have a really proactive kind of first-hand response in terms of not waiting for emails or like waiting for situations or circumstances as a final resort, but making sure that support is there straight away. Does anyone want to pick up on kind of that or have anything to add?
Can I just say that thank you, Anna. That was really important to get your voice in on that there. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us today. And I think, of course, what you say is, I think there's a huge communications piece around this as well. And I think there's a bigger issue where some of the systems in the university are set up, I think, with helpful intent, but in a way that takes an awful lot of time for students. And something I would like to see is kind of the removal for the need for students to tell their story more than once. And students tell us, I'm tired, I don't want to keep telling this story. I just want there to be systems in place where I can say, okay, this particular thing that I think is going to help me is relevant to me. I'm just going to select it from this box. The university's got my evidence. They know this situation about me. And here's what I think can help from a sort of, a menu of things that are available to you. And I think there is difficulty in a large organisation and with so many competing priorities that students have. So we're seeing an increasing number of students working part-time alongside study, sometimes more than part-time. We're seeing an increasing number of commuting students. A lot of the students we're working with, again, not everybody, but many students who identifies, who are estranged or who are care experience are more likely to be isolated, more likely to have experienced trauma, more likely to be potentially, living with that trauma, stigmatized, all these bits and pieces that mean that perhaps people don't have the resources, whether that's the emotional resources or the time resources, or even necessarily feel that they have the voice to go and ask someone for the support to get these forms filled out, or who do I speak to, or why would I tell someone that, because I don't know what the result of telling someone could be. And I think there's a big piece around how students actually find out that information. There's a trust piece in there as well. Why would I trust this person with my information if I don't know what they're going to do with it or what a potential outcome could be? And one of many, many things I adore about the Edinburgh Cares team is that they will often say to a student, how do you want to do this? Can I do this for you? Can I do this with you? And if it's a form to fill out, if it's a process, if it's some way of speaking to, a funding body, how do you want to do this? And so giving someone actually ownership over how they want to proceed with the help that they have asked for. And it's such a brilliant way to work. I learn from the team all the time, and it's such a great way to approach something. There's that student association idea, general idea of nothing about us without us, and that underpins almost all of the work that I do. And I think it's a really important thing to carry into every interaction that we as staff and as an institution have with students and also with each other all the time. I think that nothing about us without us is so important. So, Lauren, your work around getting that student voice and getting students to tell us, what is it that you want from the institution and how can we put those things together? I just love that idea around, can I do that? Can I do this for you? Can I do this with you? How can we do this together? And there's something that's quite powerful in that. And I'm sure we'll come on to it, but because we've only got a few minutes, it would be unlike me not to have mentioned intersectionality at some point by now. So I have this dream about the university where one day my job doesn't exist, Laura's job doesn't exist. It'll be a long time still to come, but we can just talk about students. And in talking about students, we know that we have taken account of every single identity, background, culture, experience that students come to us with, develop when they're with us. And I think it would be really great that we could show that our systems say, oh, hey, you've had this particular experience or you need this particular piece of support. Here it is. We thought somebody might need it. Here it is. It's waiting for you. And it'd be lovely if we would be able to just talk about students, but have that authenticity in the background to have shown that we have done all of the work to understand what people might need from us as an institution, because it's changed massively over, I would say, the last even just 8 to 10 years, what students are looking for from institutions. And students change every single year. So it's part of a really important conversation that I think we need to have. And that's where the trust part comes in. So why would students tell us these things about themselves? Why would they? And I think trusting an organisation is quite a tricky thing. We're a big old university, but trusting individuals within that to know that they'll do the right thing for you, I think is really powerful for everyone. I will stop, sorry.
I don't want to follow that from Lindsay at all, because that was so nice and so really well put. But I just wanted to also say, thank you, Anna, that you make a really, really valuable point about why would underrepresented students necessarily, you don't kind of expect that the system's going to be created for you and that people are going to come to you with support. You don't really kind of, if you're from an underrepresented or minoritized background, You have no kind of baseline understanding that there's going to be loads of help and support available for you. So why would you reach out to that? So I think it's just a really important point that you emphasize about it being everyone's responsibility to advocate for students that you know that are underrepresented. And that's like what I hope that we're doing. Hope that we're having a bit of even if it's just beginning stages. But the more that can be everybody's responsibility in the future is super important. So thank you very much for raising that.
Thank you very much for that, and for all of the kind of insight and different perspectives, and really, really valuable, I think, pieces of information that you all brought to the discussion. I'll bring it to a close. So I wonder if everyone wants to say a few closing remarks, or if there's anything you want to add as like a last minute comment before we finish.
I only wanted to say again, thanks to Anna, and also just know, like, whenever I have spoken I was privileged to kind of cover some of this work before Kirsten came into the role, and I don't think any of the conversations I've had with Estranged students. They've been really powerful. I've been so grateful, and kind of felt very privileged that they felt able to share that information with me, and I take it so seriously that they've done that, and that then we do something with that, and those conversations, they stay with you and they stay with us all, but that's because they're really powerful and they're a real privilege to have. But they do stay with me, and I do hold them as really important. But we also share that, and we share that and support each other, because it's a lot for someone to tell us that information, and we need to do something important with that, to honor that. So yeah, no, I just wanted to sort of echo that, and just sort of, I suppose, emphasize how important they are. Yeah.
Any other comments before I wrap up? Stunning. Thank you all so much for those perspectives and those insights. I think it was all very, very insightful and very valuable, and I definitely found it very useful. I think it gives me a lot of hope, and definitely reaffirms that this university is taking a very keen and strong interest, and that is because of a lot of the work of the people on this call. So just want to acknowledge that and say thank you for that, and thank you for your time. It is so appreciated. So thank you very much for that. And obviously, going forward, if there are any kind of comments, I think students especially, can reach out to the Student Association, Lauren, our VP Welfare, in terms of support, but also kind of the WP department. Edinburgh Cares is obviously a really, really valuable source for all kinds of support and information and practical advice. So thank you all very, very much. I'm stopping recording there.
Thanks, Sharon, for facilitating a very